Chapter 1. In the first 2 episodes you saw the idea for a container garage was born from a tired old double carport, and how in the same phase we turned a tiny 8-foot container into a playground for my kids. In this episode things finally get properly real. If you screw this up, the crane day will be the nightmare. We head out to the site, we go into the workshop and we start tuning drawings and approvals into actual concrete and steel. We'll look at the groundworks, the surfaces, concrete pad footings, and the very first steps we took onto the containers themselves. And as always, we'll start with the 5 tips that will save you from a lot of pain on your own project. Chapter 2, and these 5 tips. Tip 1. Plan your levels and your water drainage first. The ground around the house and the garage need to be shaped so that surface water never runs towards the building, but always away from them. Tip 2. Plan all the surfaces, especially sewer and fresh water, before you pour any concrete. If you later have to drill through foundations or fight your way around obstacles because pipe is missing, you're doing the same job twice. Tip 3. Always put at least 1 extra empty conduit into the ground. You don't know today what connection you'll want in 5 years, but you will be happy about every spare conduit you have. Tip 4. With pad footings for containers, 2 things are scared: diagonals and heights. If the rectangle and the levels aren't right, no container will ever sit properly on those pads, no matter how good everything else is. Tip 5. Always align your foundation to the container corners and the main longitudinal beams. Just dropping containers somewhere onto the ground will come back to bite you later, structurally, visually, and when you start doing the interior. Chapter 3. At this point in the story, the situation looked like this. The idea was clear: a 9-meter wide container garage made from 3 cut down 40-foot containers. Planning approval was granted with a defined building footprint and a strict height limit. We knew exactly where the garage would sit on the property and how much maneuvering space we would have in the front. And the 8-foot playground container for the kids was finished and in use. So most of the paperwork was done, so from here it was about actually building. Chapter 4. From this point on, the project moved forward in 2 worlds at the same time. In the workshop where we started preparing the containers physically, and on the site where we did groundworks, laid the surfaces and poured the footings. Both had to line up perfectly in the end. Chapter 5. In the workshop, the first step was to select the right 40-foot containers. What we looked at was their overall condition, because we knew we would be cutting the big openings into them, the year and the style, so the double doors would look consistent across all 3 units, the floor build-up and any existing damages. Anything you ignore at this point tends to come back much harder later, especially when you start working on the interior. But now it was clear: 3 full-length 40-foot containers almost 12 meters across were off the table. The approved solution was 3 containers cut down to around 30 foot, giving us roughly 9 meters in total frontage. So we translated that geometry into actual work steps. Where exactly do we cut each container? Which end do we keep and to the double door face to the front or to the back? Where will we need openings for doors, windows and garage doors later on? And where do we need extra reinforcement? In this episode, we will stay fairly high level on the workshop side. In episode 4, I will walk you step by step through how we actually cut the containers, close them back up and rebuild the structure properly. Chapter 6. While the first markings were going onto the container in the workshop, we were out on site and dealing with levels. The first questions were: where is the finished floor level of the house? Where should the finished floor level of the garage be? And in which direction should rainwater run away from the buildings? Using a rotary laser, we surveyed the plot and set the reference level, our 0 point. Based on that, we are planning approval specifies a maximum building height of 2.75 meters. A standard container is around 2.89 meters or 9.6 foot on the outside. If we had simply placed the containers onto the existing ground, we would have had two issues. On paper, we would be over the allowed building height, and in practice, we would end up with a step in front of the garage doors and would have to build up afterwards with gravel concrete to drive in comfortably. So we decided to sink the entire building about 16 centimeters, roughly the height of the container's base frame. That achieved two things at once. The top edge of the containers ended up at around 2.73 to 2.74 meters, comfortably under the maximum height limit. And far more important in the day use, we created a truly level step-free entrance in front of the future garage doors. There is no step or no extra ramp and later build-on required. You simply drive into a flat surface. Those 16 centimeters of lowering weren't just a detail, they were a deliberate decision, combining compliance with the height limit and real-world usability. Chapter 7. Once the levels were set, we moved on to planning the services. In the garage, I wanted a proper bathroom with shower and toilet, a workshop with enough power, a gym with a decent lighting, and a reliable data connection, meaning Ethernet or just maybe some Wi-Fi from the house. So we needed to bring from the house to the garage sewer, fresh water, power on several circuits, and data cables. We first decided on the routes, then dug the trenches. Sewer with the correct fault towards the existing connection, fresh water deep enough to protect against frost, power and data and protective conduits, plus an extra empty conduit simply as a spare for the future. It was also crucial that the pipes and the conduits come out of the ground exactly where we would need them later. Sewer and water where the bathroom in the garage would be, power and data where the distribution boards and technical area would sit. Nothing is more annoying than having to cut through fresh concrete or finished floors because you brought a connection up into the wrong place. Chapter 8. The next big decision was how to found the building. One option was to pour one large concrete slab and put containers on top. That works and has a few drawbacks. A lot of more concrete, very heavy and difficult to undo if you ever want to remove it, and for containers often overkill from a structural point of view. Containers are designed to transfer the loads through defined points at the corners along the main longitudinal beams. So we decided to use pad footings placed exactly where the container needs to be on the ground. Chapter 9. With pad footings, setting out can make or break the whole job. We started by marking the outer edges of the future garage with a simple string line setup. Then we measured the diagonals to make sure our rectangle was actually a rectangle, meaning all corners are 90 degrees. From that base rectangle, we could calculate and mark the individual pad positions. Under the container corners, under the main longitudinal beams, and extra pads where we wanted to spread loads further. Because once again, if the geometry isn't right here, no container will sit nicely on those pads later, no matter how carefully you worked afterward. Chapter 10. Once the positions were fixed, we dug the pad holes, deep enough to be safe and stable, wide enough to spread the loads properly. We dropped in reinforcement, in our case simple mats were enough, and then poured the concrete. The key detail is that the top surfaces of all pads sit on the same level. We checked that with a laser again and adjusted while striking off the concrete. This might not be the most exciting part of this project to watch, but it's one of the most important. If the heights aren't right here, you will be trying to fix it later with packing plates or improvised solutions that could have avoided with 10 more minutes of careful checking while the concrete was still wet. Chapter 11. Of course, groundworks never go perfectly. We had water in the trenches at times, a few areas were The soil was softer than we expected and piles of sand everywhere. That's just part of the game. The important thing is not to relax on the critical parameters, like the levels, the faults of the sewer, pad positions and service routes. If that foundation is right, the garage will forgive a lot later. If it isn't, then even the nicest container conversion won't save the project. Chapter 12. So by end of this phase, we had two big pieces of the puzzle in place. On the site, everything was ready. Levels sorted, drainage planned, services and ground, pad footings poured and on level. And in the workshop, we had picked the containers, inspected and documented them, and marked them ready for cutting them to about 30 foot and adding structural reinforcement. In the next episode, I'll show you exactly how we turned 3 40-foot containers into the base for a 9-meter wide container garage, where we cut them, how we built the new end walls, how we integrated openings for doors and garage doors in a way that actually works structurally, and how we prepared the containers for transport out to the site. I'm Andy and I know containers. See you in the next one.